So this is a tour of the outboard gear of Studio 1 at EastWest. Now, one of the things that you'll notice about all of the rooms here at EastWest is as we go through them, you're gonna see a lot of similarities, and then every now and then, something special or unique. For example, just like all the other studios, there is going to be the classic 1176 LA2A in the room. However, in this studio, they're the Silverface 1176s, which operate slightly different from the LNs that you'll see in the other rooms. The LA2As are the standards, although one I believe in here is vintage. This bottom one, the Teletronics here, is a vintage one, and this is a newer model. So you'll have a vintage one paired with a newer one. A lot of people ask, do they sound different? Man, every fucking compressor sounds different. They've been changed over the years, and you'll see inside of these things often the components have been replaced over the years. This one looks pretty original actually. But the point is that as time goes on, people will swap out parts. Even the two models that have been the exact same work and have sat for the same amount of time will have different sounds to them at any given moment. So I don't really get into that BS. A lot of people do, but I'm not a cork sniffer like that. So there's some Drummer gates in here, not very used very often. The transient designer in here is a 4-channel transient designer, whereas the Studio 3 one is a 2-channel transient designer. Just a little variation, not a big deal. Again, the series of DBX 165s in here, these are all really great, but no DBX 160s in here, which I'm kind of partial to myself. Down here we have some 550As, as is the standard inside of every room here. Moving on, we have some EQP 1A3s. You'll notice in the Studio 3, they have the MEQ 5s. Different flavor, different thing, but cool. In here, there's 4 Langs. Langs are some of the coolest secret sauce to me in the world. They're everything that is not inside of a Pultec. Next up over here, we got a Manley Massive Passive. Everybody who's used one of these knows exactly what this is all about. Down here on the bottom, this is an Alltech compressor. This is famous for coming directly from Abbey Road, and you can see it's been remade and everything. It's got a nice plate. And then down here is the piece de resistance of every EastWest studio, the Fairchild 670. Now, every studio here except for Studio 3 has a Fairchild in it, and then Studio 5 has the floating Fairchild, which can go between there and Studio 3 at any given time. Each one of the Fairchilds at EastWest sounds a little bit different. It has a bit of a different feel to it, but they generally do the same cool thing. Effects-wise in here, there's not much, just an AMS and an Eventide and a Bricasti down here. The Bricasti handles a lot of heavy pull in here, but there's also chambers and plates access in every room. The AMS is amazing. The H3000 is one of the coolest effects units to me that's ever been made, specifically because I like to do the old, just put something on and spin the dial until something cool comes up. That's one of my favorite parts about the H3000 is just like the random weird thing that you're gonna find. And that's the Studio 1 outboard gear. Again, there's not a lot to outboard gear at EastWest because it's just not how you track records. You don't do a lot of stuff on the way in. A lot of that stuff that's happening, especially in EastWest, this is the type of place where in the 90s, when people were talking about you track on a Neve and you mix on an SSL, here is where that happened. When we look at the Studio 5 console and outboard gear, you'll understand why there is less gear in the rooms and more in the mix rooms. You commit less to tape and you use the natural sound of the room, the natural sound of the band, and the dynamics, and you choose the right microphones and the right pre's, and you're not doing a lot of correction. That's why these rooms don't have a lot of gear, because the engineers were good. You fix at the source, you don't fix with gear. You fix at the source, you fix with the musician, you fix with the sound that's coming from the artist themselves. Let's go to Studio 2. This is the outboard gear of Studio 2. Now, as much as I have just said that you don't find a lot of the extra stuff in here, Studio 2, because it is a rock room, is a little bit more customized to the rock sound of things, which means different outboard gear. Now, again, you'll see a lot of the same things that you see in the other rooms, but sometimes different configurations, sometimes different amounts of them, whatever. But here's what we're talking about with Studio 2. Starting off at the top here, we have the 550As. Again, 550As in every room. If you need an EQ that's different from a Neve EQ or a Trident EQ, certainly the API EQ is going to do that. Again, we'll have 2 EQP 1A3s from Pultec. Then we have some stereo Pultecs down here, which is a little bit of a different thing. Then one of my favorite secrets of EastWest is this Model 500 EQ equalizer. It's from Uri Technologies. It's a universal audio specialty. What is really cool about these to me is the lack of options. One of my favorite things about older gear is that it did not provide you with endless tweaking options. And I think that's one of the reasons why music today has become so sterile and so empty and doesn't feel the same, is we gave people too many options. We gave them too many FabFilter Pro Q3s to tweak and put 60 bands of EQ on, only to have their shit come out sounding worse afterwards. Simplicity like these is beautiful to me. Up next, we got the GML EQ. If you are going to be surgical, the GML EQ is the surgical EQ to me. Maybe I'm wrong, I don't know, but we're gonna skip some of the processing stuff, some of the effects-based stuff. We're gonna go back to more compression for right now. Down here, the LA3As. This is the studio for the LA3As, because if you're gonna get that really crazy sound with an LA3A, it's gonna happen inside the rock room. After that, the Innovonics that's right here is a very strange and rare compressor, and it sounds fucking cool as hell, but it has a specific sound. Moving over, skipping the FX and coming back over here. Now we got 3 LA2As. The top one here is a vintage. The next 2 are remakes of the vintage. You can see the difference in the face plates. They look completely different, and they even say UA Classics right over here. So these are the remakes. This is the original Teletronics leveling amplifier. Down here, we have some 1176 LNs. Like I said before, the LN is my preferred 1176. I like these. These are not vintage, these are newer ones, but they sound fantastic and I love them. Moving down further, we have the Compex limiter. The Compex is an extremely aggressive limiter in my opinion, and it's very surgical in its use. So I'm a big fan of the Compex, but I also use the Compex a lot to just smash the living dog shit out of stuff. After that, we have the Neve 33609. The Neve 33609 is modeled after the 32264 bus compressor that came in the Neve console originally. Now, there is one in Studio 3, which we'll see next, that is a 32264, and it is exactly like this. It's the same thing. This is the model of the compressor that they turned the 32264 into when they found out everybody liked it so much they could sell it by itself. Below that, the DBX 160s, an extremely aggressive DBX compressor. If you want something to smash 30 dB of compression, bam, that's what the DBX 160 is for. Below that is a DBX 162, which is a stereo compressor, and below that is a DBX 165. Down here, we have the favorite of the rock music world, which I think is very comparable to an 1176, but is the Distressor. The Distressor is a fast compressor or variable speed compressor, but it's often preferred by people who do rock music because it has a variation between extreme aggression and very low attack type feel. Below that is a DBX FS900, which is a frequency specific, usually used for de-essing. Over here, we have a whole series of Lang EQs. Lang EQs, Lang EQs, Lang EQs. Lang EQs are the shit. They are everything that the motherfucking Pultec wishes it was. This is one of my favorite EQs to exist. They have so much more versatility than the EQPs and the MEQs, and they sound awesome as well. Now, built into the wall, you can fit so much compression into this baby. This is the Fairchild 670. This one is built into the wall here in Studio 2. This actually, before this was built into the wall here, this is where all of the tape shit was. There was always a distrippolizer here that you could use with the tape machine, and all of the tape connections came out of here, and you would just put the Studer right here, the couch was over a little bit, and then the distrippolizer was there, and then no Fairchild. But now the Fairchild is in the wall here, and you can just grab this anytime you want. A studio with one Fairchild is amazing. This studio has 3 Fairchildren. I'm gonna stick with that, Fairchildren. Fairchilds, Fairchildren. I'm staying Fairchildren. Fairchildren works. So this is Fairchild for Studio 2. This stays in here all the time, just like the Studio 1 stays in there all the time. The floater goes between 3 and 5. Back to our effects units over here. There's a little bit more interesting stuff in here, but again, I don't find that most people use the effects units nearly as much as they do the compression and EQ that are in these rooms. Starting off here with the PCM42, that's a digital delay. Again, once you get into the digital realm, you're not talking about analog anymore. So it's not really about like the way it sounds, because it can be modeled the way it sounds. They have these units, you know, like the Eventide stuff, the TC Electronics stuff, the PCM40, these all exist in the computer now, and they don't fail or break most of the time. So it makes more sense usually to use these things inside of the computer. Plus, if you use these things as outboard gear, you have to record them and print them, which means anything that you do can't change with what you're using here. If you use them inside the computer, you can swap them out at any given time and nobody cares. Down here, we have another H3000. Again, the spin the dial trick is one of my favorite tricks that has ever existed in the history of harmonizers. So I love doing that. There's a lot of cool options on there. The AMS, again, this is the Prince standard. It is such a good piece of outboard gear. If you're going to do something outboard, that AMS really does it for me. And then over here we have a prime time, which is a delay that not a lot of people see very often. Oh, and here's the distripolizer that used to be over there in the wall. So now we have this prime time, really cool piece of gear. They make a Sound Toys version that's so very similar to this and does almost the exact same thing, but sometimes it feels cool to just have a piece of gear that you can play with the buttons on. So I understand that. And that is the Studio 2 outboard gear. This is the outboard gear of Studio 3. Studio 3 is a tracking room just like 1 and 2 here at EastWest. And so it's important to remember that when you're tracking, especially in the old days, you weren't doing a lot of processing, which is why there's not a lot of processing. I think everybody expects that whenever they come into EastWest, they're gonna see rows and rows of 1176s like it's Chris Lord-Alge's mix room or something, but that's just not how things were done and even still are done. So let's talk real quick about the outboard gear in Studio 3. Studio 3, because it is a Trident A range, this is a room that we like to give a lot of flexibility. I say we, I don't work here or nothing. I'm just a big fan, you know? So Studio 3 is the place where we like to give a lot of options when it comes to mic pre's specifically, because the Trident is an extremely distinct flavor. I like to think of mic pre's always as flavor, and the Trident is a very distinct flavor. So if you're going to have a very distinct flavor, you should have some other palettes to be able to draw from if you need to. Starting up at the top are these Helios pre's. These Helios pre's are very cool. They have a very unique flavor to them themselves, but they're a little bit more clean and transparent than the Trident A range is. Now, if you want to go really transparent, you're going to come down here to these burls. These burls are very clean. They like to say that they're not clean and they have they're very clean to me. Over here, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 channels of 31105s. Now, these 31105s are these same mic pre's that you'll find in the Studio 1 console. And in fact, as you'll notice, look like they've been made, because when you have an 80 channel console like a 31105, like the 8078 in Studio 1, you tend to have a lot of extra channels. And eventually somebody said, why don't we put some of these extra channels into a rack and just have them like that? So this is a custom made piece. This is something that somebody put together at one point in time and is literally just the Studio 1 console in a rack form. The last mic pre that are in here are these Vite pre's, which are these groove tube pre's. I've only used these a handful of times. They're very specific sounding, and for me, they're mostly like great for bass, but a lot of people like them, so they're kind of a unique little thing. Next up, we can go to EQs, because there is, again, not a lot of EQs in these rooms because it's not very advantageous to do a lot of patching. In my mind, anytime you need to patch something, you're increasing the likelihood of something getting screwed up on a session. And when you work at a place like this with vintage gear, you want to reduce the amount of problems that you could end up interfacing. So here, first we'll start off with the Pultecs. These are amazing, the MEQ5s. And then down below them, the sister companion of the Pultec, which is the Langs. The Langs to me are one of the secret sauce. You'll find these in every room here at EastWest, and they are some of the best transformer-based EQs that you can ever get. They complement the Pultecs in the way that you think about a triangle complementing, where it's the other half of 180 degrees, right? This is everything that the Pultec isn't, the Lang is. It just has different frequency points, different ways that it operates. It's a little bit more specific, and whereas the Pultec is broad, sweeping motions, the Langs are a little bit more direct. Down here we have some 550As, which are the standards. Everybody likes some API 550s. Those are cool. And then below that is the GML. The GML is the most surgically accurate, beautiful EQ in the entire world. And anybody that doesn't think so has no idea what they're talking about and should never be allowed to touch a record again for the rest of their life. After that, we're gonna talk some compression. All the standards in EastWest, you'll find these in almost every room, and I love that. LA2A, 1176, 1176, and then down here is a Compex limiter. This is another fine piece of work that you'll find at EastWest. Again, a lot of times especially in older studios, somebody did something along the way, like take a 322/64 mix bus out of a Neve console and say, well, why don't we just rack it up and throw it in here? This is a very common thing. This is literally taken directly from the mix bus of a Neve console, racked up and put inside of the Studio 3 outboard gear. This is comparable, or it is in fact the same thing as the 33609 compressor, but it is just the actual bus compressor. The 33609 was somebody going, oh, let's make a bus compressor. This is the 322/64, which is literally somebody took it out of a Neve console and said, now it's a racked up 33609, look at us. Below that, one of my favorite tricky compressors is the Transient Designer. This is a kind of unique piece. They have plugins for them now, but I don't think they sound nearly as good as the hardware unit, and I have no idea why. Below that, we have some classic DBX compressors, the 160, which is an extremely aggressive compressor, the 165, which is not as aggressive, and then the 162. And this is a stereo compressor, and then this is a mono compressor, and they're pretty unique and special in their own way. Then we have some of the more newfangled DBX, the 160X. I don't ever really touch those, but they're here and people have them. The FS900 is just a de-esser, essentially. It's a frequency-specific compressor. The distressor is below that, and I believe that is all the compression in here. It is. All right, so now we're on to effects. Once again, as a tracking studio, especially back in the day, you weren't really gonna be throwing a lot of effects on in the tracking process. So there isn't always a lot of effects in these rooms, especially stuff that is so easily replaced today by the digital realm in the computer. So there are some things like, for example, there's some gates here, which are drummer gates. Nobody really ever uses these except for like really special situations. But below that, we have the TC Electronics delay, and then we have one of my favorite effects units of all time, the AMS. The AMS is one of the most amazing effects units. It was used by Prince. A lot of Prince's drum sounds and vocal sounds. There's so many great, cool sounds on there. The ambient setting, the delay, if you use the delay with no decay time, it's just fucking phenomenal. Big fan of the AMS. Over here is a Lexicon PCM70. The PCM70, again, cool unit, very easily replicated. In fact, most of the stuff that was made back then became the earliest plugins that we use now. So the PCM70 is in here. And the last thing that we have inside this room, effects-based, is the chambers and plates, which are connected to the patch bay, but we'll touch on that in a different video. Although it is not outboard gear, I'm gonna include it in this section because people are always curious, what interface are they using in these studios? Now, in Studio 3, it's the Burrow mothership, and they have, I believe, 48 channels of Burrow mothership in here. This is a tour of the EastWest Studio 5 outboard gear. Because this studio is primarily used for tracking vocals, it's the good kind. Of course, you can use the SSL pre's on the board, and those are wonderful, but another rack of the 31105s in here, always gonna be loved. So this is just like the Studio 3 rack, 31105, same build, same design, same story. It's all just leftover pre's from the Studio 1 console that they had so many of them that they racked up into a unit. There's also a rack of, I believe, 8 1081s here, which are pretty much similar to the 1073s. So you kind of got those floating around however they're needed. On the dynamic side in Studio 5, first we have an LA2A, just like in the other studios. We have got 1176s, but in here we have both the LNs and the silver faces, which is really cool. Again, this is a mix room and a vocal room. This is the one place in this building where it makes a lot of sense. There's compressors on every single channel, and also there's a ton of outboard compressors. The DBX 160s, like I said, these are staples here. Everybody loves the DBX 160s. They sound amazing. Next up, we've got some stereo compression here. We've got the AD 2044. I guess the Avalon stuff is all really clean. I almost never touch these, but it's fine. 33609, everybody loves a Neve compressor. A Manley Very-Mu, which is a really cool compressor. I like this a lot. I use it a lot now. Another Compex, which I said very surgical, but also very aggressive if you want it to be. A pair of distressors down here. And then I think this is like a Fatso. Yeah, that's what they're called. It's also by Empirical Labs, but it's different from them. Anyway, Fatso down here, that's cool. Up next, we have got what is probably the hip-hop world's favorite compressor, the CL1B. I think it can be really good. I've always not enjoyed the fact that the knobs don't have this. This is the type of shit that I go on about. Like, yeah, sure, it sounds good, but the knobs are too loose, man. I wish the knobs had more resistance to them. I'd like them more if they had a little bit more resistance. They feel cheap to me. Even though this is like one of the most expensive compressors known to man, I'm like, I don't know, it feels cheap, man. They're just too easy to move, you know? It's like, feel these burls. Yeah, no, that's a fucking mic pre, bro. The fucking Pultex, dude, now that's a knob, dude. These knobs, too easy to move. Not a big fan. Down here, there's some more compression, the 525s, and then there's also 550Bs. Everywhere else, they're 550As. These are the 550Bs. There is a 550A there here. Also some 560s. This is the real API complement. Everybody likes, if you're gonna put some stuff in the lunchbox, put the API complement up in there. That's a little taste of everything. I didn't mention these with the pre's, but there's some burl pre's in here as well. Anywhere there's a lunchbox in EastWest, there's usually a couple burl pre's. Just another option for some pre's in this room. It's always good to have. Below that is the 200B from Summit Audio. This is a cool EQ, especially since, again, this is a mixing room. Having a few options for some stereo EQ is awesome for in here. There used to be a Suntech in here, but they must have taken it out temporarily. Up next is the Chandler Limited, the TG1. This is a great compressor too. Again, stereo. Stereo is the key function because you're going to be doing a lot of mixing in here, so having something like that on the stereo bus is going to be great. There is usually also another Fairchild in here, but it has been floated out to another room now. Up next is the Massive Passive. I never use this one because I don't ever use this room for mixing. I'm always tracking in this room, and this is a big bad boy mixer, so I like that. Whenever I'm using the Massive Passive, it is usually on a mix bus thing, and it's very rarely on like an individual instrument. That's cool in here. The GML again, I love this. I wish that they had some Langs in here. Why aren't there Langs in here, man? I don't know if you know about the Langs, right? But they are like the Pultec if the Pultec was like all the things that it's not, you know? It's another tube EQ like that, you know? The Transformers, it's all warm and just wonderful, but it's just so much more surgical and clean than the Pultec, man. I don't know. You got to check them out. They're called Langs. They're the best EQs you can have. But then they got these Pultecs in here, which is cool. I think the Samson faceplates in here is probably one of the most hilarious jokes that has ever happened. Because you could just flip this over and it wouldn't say Samson on the other side. They're just blanks. But somebody put those out thinking that it was funny. I guarantee this. Somebody did that thinking it was funny that this Samson gear, which is like the lower than Behringer gear of the audio world, is in between all of this hundreds of thousands of dollars of fucking gear. Moving over here, the Transient Designer. This is a 4-channel Transient Designer. I love these. They make a plug-in version of the Transient Designer, and I swear to God, it's not the same. I don't know why it's not the same. I don't know anything about how the Transient Designer works other than it's like compression stuff, but like, it's not the same. This is the fucking Transient Designer. PCM42 below that. I love a PCM42. Again, even though it's all this outboard gear, the effects world of the studio is still kind of like, you'll never have as much effects as you will in the box. You'll never have as much control over these effects as you will in the box. So it doesn't make sense to really have them. It's like you can only use this for one delay. I can put 500 delays on in Pro Tools. So it's usually the thing people care about the least, but there's always some options in here. I can tell you there is supposed to be an H3000 in this hole, but someone has clearly taken it just recently for something. And you know what, man? That's how studios be. Don't be giving anybody a hard time or leaving shit in the comments. That stuff makes me angry, you know? AMS down here, the RMX-16. Again, this is one of my favorite effects units in all of history. It's so good. Used by so many people for so many things, like all the iconic stuff is through this AMS, and I love it. And then over here, the last thing in here is a Lexicon 480. I don't know, it's one of them. It's a number, it's a Lexicon. Again, famous for its reverbs in the 70s and 80s, not so much anymore today, but they do sound cool and they're good if you're trying to do a mix. And that is Studio 5's outboard gear. And that has been our tour of the EastWest Studio outboard gear in each studio. It's always rotating, it's always changing because in fact it's all vintage gear, and so it has to change. Inevitably something breaks, something gets moved, something gets replaced, something gets brought in. Somebody just sometimes leaves some stuff here and we're like, yo, we should get one of those. And then we end up getting one and they never pick it up and we got 3 more. So it's always evolving, it's always rotating around here. I'm sure there's some cool things that you've never seen before. Maybe you've never seen, you know, a DBX 165 or 162 before. Maybe you've never seen a Lang EQ before. So make sure you check those out because they're some of the greatest pieces of gear. You should definitely at least be familiar with them if you're looking into the engineering world yourself. Make sure you check out EastWest on all social media and check out me, Greazy Wil, everywhere social media exists.